So moving into our next topic, this is a panel discussion, and it's an interesting topic of, does diversity really generate profit for organizations? And so I want to start by sharing some research that was actually conducted last year, so quite recent. The research took place against close to 22,000 companies, over 91 countries, so quite representative. I mean, we're all analytics, I think would say, sounds statistically significant, right? So here are some of the findings from that survey, and really the core of it was, is there a correlation between the percentage of senior women in roles, in these leadership roles, versus the amount of profit these companies are generating? So some of their findings were that 60% of these companies had no female board members. 50% had no female C-suite members. And only 5% of these companies had a female CEO. So the people that conducted this survey, which were the Peterson Institute of International Economics, concluded that actually men have a dominant role in the world that we live in. It's not difficult to work that out. But what they did find is for the companies that have over 15% or have 30% of females in their leadership team versus 0, is that actually those companies had a 15% increase in their revenue on an annual basis. And that's not simply created by the fact that you put women into these, into these leadership roles and sat around the table. But what it's reflective of is the fact that they've got this openness in their environment and their culture. So it's openness in terms of diversity of thinking, but it's also openness in the diversity of skills that they have. So that's good news for us. Now, how are we doing in the UK? In 2010, the situation in the UK was pretty poor. 12.5% of our boards were occupied by females. Now, the good news is that that's really changed over the last few years. And today, we're at 27.9%, which is fantastic. But I think we'd all say that in the world today, we're 50-50 of male and females, so that's still not good enough. Now, the good news is that this discussion is being talked about around many top tables in the industry and across different companies. And some of those are actually our sponsors today that really care about diversity and making a difference and changing that statistic to be more representative of the population that we live in. So I'd like to welcome on stage our sponsors, so please come and join me. So thank you. Great to have you all here. So David's joined me, is going to join me in moderating this session. So David is the chief editor at Data IQ. Data IQ is a strong advocate of diversity, especially of women in data and analytics. He's going to support me, or Data IQ have been a supporter of women in data since our inception 3 years ago. So it's been great to have their support along the journey. David will be offering a little bit of industry insight as he listens to some of our panel conversation and share his reflections. So great to have you here, David.
Thank you.
Great. So I would like to get our panelists to introduce themselves. So why don't we start on my... Oh, sorry. A few technical problems.
Hi, I'm Lisa Bennett. I'm head of analytics at Sainsbury's.
Athina, Kanioura, I'm the Global Data Science Lead for Accenture.
Karien Esterhuyse from Vanquis Bank, looking after customer exposure and pricing.
Clare Kitching from QuantumBlack. I'm a principal in analytics.
Hi, I'm Ramneet Julka. I look after analytics and research in Barclays.
And I'm Francisca Zanoguera. I lead analytics for the Expedia affiliate network.
Hello, my name is Sarah Redman, and I'm Head of Customer Experience and Training with Experian. Hello, everyone.
Great, thank you. So Sarah, perhaps I can start with you. Why have Experian sponsored an event such as this?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the statistics that were shown pretty much answer it all. You know, Experian wants a piece of that, selfishly. Us ladies at Experian have a bit of a joke in that Experian is probably one of the few places that you can go where you will never need to queue for the bathroom. But, you know, jokes aside, we've really noticed that there's a severe shortage of women in data science roles. And a big industry shortage as well. And I think we feel that if we only focus on 50% of the population, we're doing ourselves a bit of a disservice, and we're actually really shrinking the pool that we can find our top talent. And ultimately, Experian wants to be a great place to work, a profitable place, and a really successful place. So with that in mind, why wouldn't we sponsor an event like this?
Thank you. And maybe, Clare, if I can ask you the same question, you know, coming from QuantumBlack, you know, you're facing out to clients. So why is diversity such an important factor for you?
Well, our parent company, McKinsey, did a study a few years ago that really said diversity within companies matters to performance. And we have wholeheartedly taken that on board. And I think as we look in any STEM subjects and STEM related industries, we don't see that diversity with women. And so I think being part of events like this is helping to build that community, to show other women in the industry that people can be successful, and help give tips and tricks about how to be successful in that industry, and how to continue to grow and encourage our people coming after us. So I've got 2 young girls, and I want to make sure that they know that being in data is somewhere that women can thrive.
Thank you. And so, Francisca, you know, sponsoring a Women in Data event, you know, obviously it's just for women. What have been the reactions in the organisation at Hotels.com, especially from male colleagues?
So Expedia and Hotels.com actually it's the same company, just to clarify. So it's a company where diversity is something that is driven really from the top. So there's a huge amount of buy-in in the organization around any kind of diversity initiatives, not just around gender. And so male, in general, as women, are very supportive of us participating in this kind of events. And if something, I would say that probably our male colleagues would love to attend as well. I'm sure that if we, in the future, open attendance to the male population, I think lots of them will be here and will turn up and learn about how can we help.
Great. So maybe if I just ask, you know, the rest of you, have you had the same reactions? Have there been anything different?
So I can say the men were very jealous when they heard where we were coming, and some actually asked, where is Men in Data conference?
And maybe, David, if I can ask you, you're following the industry quite closely. I mean, what's your perspectives on this?
Well, I wanted to pick up on something that you quoted from that research right at the start, Payal, about the 15% premium in terms of the revenue uplift achievable through diversity. I was taking a look at where organisations are at in their adoption of data analytics, and it's quite surprising if you look at the FTSE 100, there are only 2 chief data officers, and yet we know that there is a premium in terms of the uplift in revenue if you adopt data analytics. So you could argue that the FTSE 100 is ahead on diversity and behind on data and analytics, but not by very much. 5%, 5 female CEOs, I know that's globally, is still rather pitiful. But there is partly a generational dimension to that. We are probably only 2 generations beyond the point where married women were supposed to give up their jobs, in some countries by law, Ireland, for example. We are only 40 years after the Equal Pay Act, and I think we're still seeing a lag. And partly that goes to, I think, the role models. We're going to hear fantastic insights this afternoon from the female lead and the WID initiative, that to the point, Claire, that you were making, I think it would be fantastic to see those role models and encourage anyone, any gender, any race to pursue without fear, without favour, the career options. Thank
you, David. So, Karien, you've been in banking for many, many years, or maybe not that many, but what's your view in terms of what women really bring to the roles?
I think it's a little bit to what you said earlier today. It's not necessarily women alone, but it's a certain trait that is more associated with women in general. One thing I know that we do is we are not afraid to ask. And I think that really helps with collaboration and with teamwork. I think we're quite creative, and that's really important within analytics. We have to approach analytical problems from various different angles. And then I think we are quite caring, and that can actually make us quite good managers, and makes that we actually look after the people in our team and try and develop them as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Lisa, from a retail perspective, why is it important to have diverse teams?
Well, I think Sainsbury's is such a big brand, and I think everyone knows it, but our customer base is so diverse, and actually if our decision makers and our analysts and our leaders aren't diverse, then we're not going to make the right decisions for our customers. So I think it's really important to us that our colleague base is just as diverse as our customers. So that's a really important one for us.
Yeah, it's amazing. I heard a stat a few weeks ago where between 60 to 80% of purchasing decisions are actually driven by females. Ramneet, you've been at Barclays for the last few years. Where are you on your analytical journey? And what have you found difficult and what's worked well?
So I think it's a bit like Diane said, right? Everybody talks about data technology, and I think financial industry, especially like Diane mentioned, talked about a lot. There's a lot of change and value that we can actually deliver. I think it's an exciting time in data and technology because we've got huge power in terms of infrastructure, new tools and technology, etc. But we're at the start of that journey. And we can see the value it can deliver, but we're in the journey to deliver it, and I don't think we've kind of just touched the surface in terms of the value we can deliver. The key challenge and the difficulty is it's a huge organization, and different stakeholders and people you work with are in different parts of the journey. So you've got stakeholders who think, I know what I need to do, I've been there, done that, I don't need data to tell me what I need to do, and you've got to deal with them. Then you've got the stakeholder who thinks they know all about data and they just need information from us and they can make the business decision. And you've got to guide them and coach them and say, no, actually, what are you trying to achieve? And then actually where we work really well is where you have the stakeholders who basically understand the value that data brings. They understand their own limitations in terms of their strengths are playing in the business and they depend on us to add value. So that's where we add the best value. We embed ourselves in the business. We really act as a consultant with them, understand their strategic objectives and say, actually, if you want to achieve growth or if this is your challenge, then this is how we can leverage the data. And that's, I think, where we really add incremental value, and we've played a huge part in terms of the P&L and the bottom line through the year. And I think it's that stakeholder journey, and I'd say second thing, just leveraging the new data, tools, technology, being in events like this, and being aware of what's happening in the industry is absolutely key. So I'm sure my team, which is here, is really excited to be part of that.
Fantastic. And I think in order to achieve and get that relationship with stakeholders, it's also about collaboration and building those relationships, which I think is what we can really bring to it. Athina, you're on the consultancy side. I mean, where are you in your analytical journey?
As you understand about my role, I'm the Global Data Science Lead, so which means I'm responsible for almost 2,500 data scientists within the organization, out of which we made a big effort to have now a percentage of 38% women within this community of practice, with a target in 2 years to be 50%, and that's a directive from our CEO, who made it very public to our investors that a company of 450,000 people will have a 50% of female population in 2 years. And obviously, we have to do the same in digital and analytics. So what we have been doing is trying to focus on the female talent in the market, trying to give them incentives to come to the company, especially in the countries where it has been more challenging when they started families like India, so giving them the option to do part-time, take more sabbatical, additional leaves. And I think this helped a lot change the culture within the company about attracting female talent in the organization, and also differentiation on how our clients perceive Accenture and Accenture Analytics in the market as a company which is data-driven, but fueled by the power of women in the organization.
Thank you. So Clare, if I turn it to you, at QuantumBlack, how do you encourage women in data? What are the things that you're doing?
Yeah, so I think one of the great things about QuantumBlack is the flexibility that they offer. And as someone who's had 2 children in the last few years, after my first maternity leave, I really saw the advantages that McKinsey and QuantumBlack offered. I came back, I wanted to take a little bit of a step back and have some more time at home. There were a multitude of roles around advanced analytics that I could go to. I tried one out for 6 months. It was good fun. Wasn't exactly what I wanted. I had the opportunity to go and try something else, which I really love now. On my second maternity leave, also having the flexibility to come back and ramp up slowly over 6 weeks and really having no stress around that. But I think one of the other things around QuantumBlack and McKinsey is that actually these benefits are open to everyone, and encouraging both men and women to take advantage of flexible benefits is really helping women in general, because that means that the onus isn't on the woman to be the flexible one in a relationship and to take on more at home. So I think while we do encourage women to do this, we also wholeheartedly encourage men, so that we encourage outside work, that there is that equality as well.
Thank you. And Francisca, if I kind of turn the question to you, I mean, are there any learnings that you can share for the journey that you've been on in how you're encouraging women at Expedia?
So, in my opinion, nothing beats top management commitment. In that, I think as soon as top management says, this is a goal, we really want to make this happen, things start happening elsewhere in the organization. And so I've seen a change since I joined, and then through that was about 5 years ago, and at some point, top management said, this is a goal, this is a target, there's numbers. Then immediately you see the actions happening, and so there's a bunch of things that we're doing. We have also flexible work environment. Work-life balance is part of our value proposition as an employer. And then we do things, for example, in my team, I do a lot of work to try to de-bias processes, like hiring processes, promotion, evaluations, etc. And what I found is that when you do that work, it actually does work. So when I look back into the last 6 months, we've hired about 7 people in my team, and of which 4 are women, without actually really trying or even discussing, is this person a man or a woman? It's been more about, this is the new process, and we think this is a better process. And at the end of it, you look at the numbers, and the numbers really improve, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So Lisa, at Sainsbury's, you said, you're this huge high street brand. Why is it so difficult to attract female talent? I mean, you're a high street brand, women love shopping. What are you finding?
I think when I look across the organisation, and it is so big, our numbers are probably pretty good, but actually when I look in the different departments, I definitely see a difference. So something like marketing, traditionally quite female, and other areas are less so. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do at Sainsbury's is create an environment where women and actually all of our colleagues can really flourish. So if you take me as an example, I've been at Sainsbury's for a number of years, worked across marketing and property, online, and now in our Centre of Excellence for Data and Analytics. And I think that's really important, because I think that makes me be seen as a more credible leader through that experience. And I'd really encourage other women really to take a leap outside your comfort zone, go and try something else, because it really can work. And even, in those male environments, I think we do bring something to the role.
Fantastic. Karien, the banking sector is traditionally quite male-dominated. I mean, have you seen the same trend at Vanquis?
Well, you could say when we look at the analytical teams, it feels very 50-50. So especially when I was looking at who would I invite along to the event, I felt there were actually quite a lot of female analysts. But then when I had to look at who did I have to contact to ask about the teams, I saw I was contacting a lot of men to ask who would go in your team. So I think it's that shift up to the higher sort of management level, not just higher management, but middle management and higher management is sort of not there yet. But that's why Vanquis has decided it's a good thing to sponsor this event again and to try and make people more aware of Vanquis and get more female talent into the business.
And so, Athina, how do we solve the problem? Do we, in terms of attracting females to these roles, do we go as far as just inviting women to be interviewed? Is that the right way forward?
Well, that's one of the way forward. I think what women want is female role models in the company. So I remember when I joined the company 12 years ago, and I came straight from academia, where we were 65% women doing our PhD and teaching, and suddenly going to an environment where I was the only woman in analytics back then. It was a bit of a cultural shock. So what we decided is that when you give women more opportunities to advance their careers and therefore move to the next level, with, of course, the right meritocracy, we're just not saying push women just for the sake of it. I think then the next generation who will come and hear about it will have the incentive to stay, because I tend to agree with you. I mean, it's easy to attract analysts and consultants, the junior people. It's very hard to retain those people when they grow up the ranks, especially when they decide to have a family and children, because they are not incentivized enough in many companies to have the right balance. So this is what we've worked a lot in Accenture, and we have some female women here from our UK practice. And it's hard. It's not an easy task to do. It's hard from all perspectives. And I remember when I joined the company, one of the female mentors I had is every time a woman is up for promotion versus a man already plans ahead 2 years ago about his next promotion. A woman will not even plan, will not ask about it. But when the time of the decision will come, will say, am I up for promotion? So they ask, not dictate. So I think it's a change in mindset that we have to coach our young generation on how to ask for it and not wait for it.
Yeah, and really owning your own career, as we talked about earlier. Sarah, I think you've just touched on it, Athina, sorry. Having a good pipeline of talent is so important. And that was actually one of the core findings from the survey that I talked about earlier, in that they found that just having a lone CEO as a female isn't going to help. It's actually having that talent all the way through the organization. What are you doing at Experian to kind of help solve some of that problem?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, it's right. And I think one of the things that we've realized is that our career paths are different. It doesn't mean that they're not equal to that of men, but we may have families, we may want to do certain things, we may have certain commitments outside of work, and that doesn't mean that we don't want to go on and have a more senior career. And we always talk about being able to have it all, but it's difficult to have it all when you're the one rushing to drop your kids off and then get to work, and then you're already looking at whether the trains are going to be late, and I think that's something that we have to accept, but we have to create an environment that looks after that and embraces that. We've launched an initiative in Experian called the Women in Experian. A subset of that is a parental network to give each other advice. We're trying to look at talent in a slightly different way. So it's not a linear thing. It's not, you're a great data scientist, why don't you become a senior? We appreciate that actually some individual contributors don't necessarily make great leaders. So we're starting to look at what is the makeup of a great leader, what is the makeup of a great high-performing team, and trying to find individuals that have those qualities. And we're trying to match those people with mentors, some of the senior women within the business, so that they can actually talk through and do that planning around their careers and talk about the fact that actually I have aspirations outside of work to achieve certain things. Does that mean I'm no longer, in the running? Absolutely not. And we're trying to create an environment where we can really talk about that and pave our jobs so that they don't automatically discount people. Mobility is a key thing. And I think that's one of the things that we always take ourselves out because we've got other commitments to do. And actually, it's about making sure that we provide an environment where you can work from home, where you can have a meeting and you can dial in and VC in, and and you can still have a life outside of work. And that's really important, as you've said, for men as well, and making sure that we really provide that. Obviously, that's looking at the sort of the top level and trying to make sure that we feed into the top level. We also want to make sure that we've got a pipeline that sits at the lower levels. So we're doing a lot of work with schools and universities to try and open some of the young females, the emerging talents' minds to what they could actually achieve, and show them some of our role models within the business to try and inspire them to think of Experian as a place where they'd like to work and have a career.
It's great to see so many initiatives. Maybe David, if I turn to you, is this an industry problem in terms of building an effective pipeline?
Well, I think if you look around this room, you'd hope the answer to that is no, it's not. Again, just to quantify that a little bit, although I mentioned there are only 2 CDOs in the FTSE 100, at Data IQ we were researching companies in London and the South East for the presence of CDOs. We've identified 275, out of which 65 are women, which is 23.8%, so let's call it a quarter, round it up, which is okay. It's below the level that your global study found. It's below what the Department of Industry is now targeting UK PLCs to try and achieve. So it's starting to happen. There is still that sort of mid-career issue, which I think is a tougher one to deal with. Employers still have this presenteeism culture. They still struggle with remote and virtual working, whatever gender you are. But we've seen, I know Barclays works, many of you work with teams that are based overseas, especially if they're outsourced specialist analytics providers. So if it can work at that kind of structural level, why can't it work for the individuals? So I think that's one way. Let's use the technologies. Let's get AI planning your route to work and where to drop off the kids and who's free to babysit on given days and so forth. I'm sure there are solutions, social and AI based, to help with that. I think another approach is just how we describe the roles that we're trying to hire into. I was astonished, Athina, at the number of analysts and data scientists you managed to find. The gender split is an interesting one because we know how you describe a job has a big impact on the nature of the candidates. And there are tools where you can run your job ads through and see if they are predisposing you towards attracting male candidates. Don't just list a whole bunch of qualifications and experience. Describe the role more, the nature of the work, the sort of tasks that you're going to be involved with, does give you a more diverse pipeline of talent. So given how competitive it is to recruit people into this industry, any business has to be using whatever is available, both to bring in the skilled workers and also to retain them, because they are expensive to recruit. If your data scientists quit or move on after a year and a half because they're bored or you haven't given them the next progression, then it's going to cost you a lot of money and you'll lose productivity. So that's just about being an intelligent employer. That doesn't mean that employers are necessarily intelligent.
Interesting. So Karien, you're a mother of 2 girls. How was it like coming back from maternity leave? How did Vanquis support you?
Yeah, it's quite a shock coming back. I think the biggest thing is getting used to a new routine. around all the drop-offs and childcare and the sleepless nights. Vanquis helped by giving me a phased return. So the first 3 months I worked for 3 days a week, and that just sort of made me get used to that routine. When I went to 4 days, that was a bit of a shock, and when I go to 5 days, that's a bigger shock. But to make it a bit more gradual. Then I think I didn't realize beforehand how much a company can actually change in a period that you're out. So I wasn't out for long, 6-7 months. But when I came back, I didn't come back to the same roles both times. As you mentioned, the Vanquis did the same. They gave me different options of roles that I could choose from, and I could then see where I was the best fit and what sort of suited my lifestyle at this moment to sort of do that. Then I think lastly, the thing that you don't appreciate enough before you have kids is time. That was gone. So I couldn't stay late and do all the extra work as I did before. So that was sort of my way of getting ahead when I was younger, is working those extra hours and getting things done and pushing myself. But now I had to rely on different skills. So I had to use my knowledge around the business and sort of use my people skills and sort of collaborate more. And it was good to know that Vanquis actually acknowledged that as a benefit. So they didn't sort of look back and say, oh, you're not putting in the hours. They actually felt that I was a valuable member of the team because I was able to contribute something.
Thank you. And so Ramneet, you're also a mother of 2 children, maybe a bit older than Karien's. How have Barclays helped you in managing your work-life balance?
It's a very good question, Pal. And I think I'll answer it in 2 fronts. Because at the end of the day, it's about work-life balance. And I think one aspect is the way Barclays has invested in me professionally. And then I'll talk about the personal bit. So I think professionally, Barclays, I think what really helps us, Barclays has got a huge focus on diversity. So they genuinely believe that to be able to succeed, we've got to be building and maintaining a diverse and inclusive workforce. So part of that is building the pipeline of women talent that we spoke about. So it's investing in programs. So I've been on programs where they're basically saying they're talking about transformative leadership in today's world. And that talks about things like collaboration, empathy, inclusiveness, an open kind of network. And those are all things that traditionally women are much stronger at and we bring to the table. So it's giving confidence in myself and having those programs where I can talk to other women colleagues and actually making us confident about bringing our own leadership style at work. Whereas traditionally, we'd be almost forced to have or adopt a masculine style. This thing actually, an organization would benefit by having multiple diverse leadership styles. So actually get your own authentic leadership style to work. And the beauty of that is the more I can get my own full self, true self to work, we know that individuals do their best and they get the most efficient and effective. So I think that's one way they're trying to build that pipeline and the pipeline of future role models and so on. The second thing then is on the personal front, and I think we spoke about processes, and I think Barclays has got similar processes in terms of work-life balance and flexible working, a lot of shared leave, parental leave. But I think more than the processes, the way it's made easier is just the role modeling. So when I joined Barclays, it was amazing. It wasn't just the women, it was the men I saw with young families who were basically taking shared leave, parental leave, and was role modeling at the top. So I had my peers, senior leaders, 2 of them actually, to share an example, last year, took 2 months off during the summers. One of them did it because he wanted to just spend the summers with 3 young kids and spend that quality time. The other one took 2 months off to just pursue his personal interest, saying, actually, I've always wanted to cycle. I'm going to train and cycle at the Tour de France. Excellent. And when you speak to women in the team, and I think even for myself, that was an inspiration to say, actually, if they can do it when I want to do it in my career, it's absolutely fine. And I've got 2 young kids, so a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old. I work flexibly, a bit like you. I reach office early, leave early. I want to be home to put my daughter to bed, get them to do the homework, and then I log in later at night, and I still do the hours. But what's fantastic is I can do it at my choice on the hours that work for me. And it's fantastic. And I think you mentioned we're already in different locations. Technology is the big enabler. I work from home on Fridays. Term time, I work from home. I try to work from home twice a week. And the fantastic thing is, I was talking about this event to my manager earlier this week, and he didn't even know I work from home on Fridays, which is brilliant. I thought, amazing. I said, no, well, I do. And I think that's the beauty, which is I can work flexibly, but it hasn't impacted my impact, my influence at work, and what I can do. And I think that's true for all the team. And I think that's really how Barclays is helping in terms of that flexibility.
Fantastic. Really great to hear how organisations are adapting and actually challenging us in how we're working. You know, Clare, let's just say in this world where at QuantumBlack, let's just say you were 50-50 men and women, you know, so you've got equality. You know, part of your role is to then face out to clients who have their own gender profile. Talk me through some of the challenges of that.
Well, my current team, we are 80% female, so this is great. But our client we're working with is generally 80% male. But I think one of the things with consulting that you realise is every client and culture is slightly different, and you have to adapt the way you communicate. So yes, bring your whole self to work, but the way you communicate with people needs to alter so that you can get what you want, so that you can help them, and you can really relate to each other. So I think sometimes women feel that, oh, this is male-dominated, therefore I have to totally change the way I want to be. No, you don't, but you do have to realise that the way you talk, you know, maybe to your kids or your girlfriends is not the way you're going to engage everyone in that boardroom. So I think one of the beauties of consulting is giving you lots of practice of understanding what is the best way to engage people and how do you adapt your authentic style to get the best out of other people.
Thank you. You know, David, any kind of advice for the people in this room? You know, we've talked about a few challenges. You know, it's great to hear that companies are supporting us, but what would you say to everyone here that we should take away from today?
Well, I think Athina said something very interesting about women perhaps not planning their careers, not demanding those promotions. Now, you know, we shouldn't assume that all men are, you know, ruthless operators. They're building their political networks and they know their next few moves. But they perhaps get encouraged to think like that much more. So I think there's a lot to be learned in terms of sort of personal development. We have actually an article on our site called How to Be a Valued Expert, and it's written by a leadership coach called Thomas Barter. And he makes the point very clearly there that you might assume your organization knows how brilliant you are and the great work that you're doing, and that somehow if you just sit there and you work and, you know, you produce these great outputs, everyone will see that. They don't. You have to go and tell them. You have to constantly be in the face of your business saying, I am delivering fantastic work for this business. Now, that's tough, especially if, as a data or an analyst person, perhaps you are more of an introvert, which, you know, we haven't necessarily touched on neurotypologies as part of this. But you do have to learn some ways to develop that skill. Now, one way of doing it is by connecting with the big picture within your business. There's a story that in the 1960s, President Kennedy was visiting NASA. And, you know, NASA employs thousands of people. And he stopped one chap in a corner and says, what do you do at NASA? He said, well, my job is to put a man on the moon. Now, that guy's a cleaner. But what he was seeing was his role in the big picture. That, you know, unless all of the small component parts work together and you see yourself holistically within that business, you won't necessarily get the advancement. Think of it in terms of you're getting into the lift and the CEO gets into the same lift and turns to you and says, what's your job? If you say, well, I run regression analyses on churn predictors in our mobile SIM-only customers, game over. You will never hear from the CEO again. If you say, I'm helping us to become the #1 for customer satisfaction, he'll have a second question. I'm sorry, it will be a he, but You know, there'll be a second question, well, how are you doing that? Well, I'm looking at what creates churn. Well, how are you doing that? I run regression analyses, et cetera, et cetera. So there are ways to present yourself within the business that I think can have a big impact. And I think especially, you know, as women and culturally with the way that you get coached in a negative sense, you need to break a few of those bonds and adopt a few more of the conventionally male habits of boasting a little bit.
Thank you, really insightful. And it's around what is the business problem we're there to solve, and using analytics to help that. Francisca, what's your one piece of advice to everyone in the room?
So I would probably go with something you said earlier, which is don't try to fit in too much. I think you have to be flexible, but I think there's a limit into how much you can get out of who you are. And so I think it's just smarter to try and find environments that will welcome who you are. I think it's just following the path of least resistance. So that's something that I have learned over the time. And the other thing maybe I would say is focus on what you can contribute. Don't focus on what you're missing. You're always going to be missing something. So just focus on what you have and what you can contribute and just go for it.
Thank you. And maybe Athina, the same question. What's your one advice to the lovely ladies here?
Well, the advice that I give my teams as well, especially our female members, is be confident and be vocal about your capabilities and your achievements in the organization, because this is the only way, to David's point, that the company will recognize what you have done, why you are a valuable member of the team, and why you should be equally treated to a male colleague who has been at the leadership's back every single day. And because I see the percentage of time the male employees spend with me versus our female employees. And it's much more with the male employees. So we're trying to change this around, but the change needs to come from you and not from me.
Lisa?
I'm going to do one that I usually hate people telling me, but use your network. And I say I hate people telling me that because I think actually I hate walking into a room and not knowing anyone and thinking, this is my opportunity to network. But when I look back at my career, I actually think of all the opportunities that have come about because I've overheard a conversation between some of my colleagues and said, there's a role coming up there, what do you think? Or actually those opportunities presenting themselves because of people I know. But also where you're not the expert in everywhere, I find it really useful to have a broad remit of people I know and I can call upon to help me. So picking up the phone, what do you think a store manager would think of this? And being able to do that. So definitely use the people around you.
Fantastic.
Could I just comment on that, Pyle? It is one of the advantages that you have as women. You are much better networkers than men are. You can create networks from scratch in a way that men don't. Men, if they weren't at school with someone or in a sports team with someone, that's it. It doesn't happen for them. So I absolutely endorse what you say there, Lisa.
So, it's incredible. You're all role models in the industry. You're role models for the people in this room. But it's not just yourselves, it's also the organizations that you work with, and making these events happen, and having, kind of opening it up to so many attendees. So, just on behalf of everybody in this room, I'd like to say thank you to both you and your companies for supporting Women in Data this year. So thank you. So I know you're with us for the rest of the day. So again, please come and talk to these amazing role models in their, organizations and in the industry. And please learn more, but also, you're going to learn a lot from the network that we have in this room. So thank you again.